from my point of view, one has to look at the empirical evidence, not the opinions that are written into books or TV documentaries or even websites, but the real empirical science that's published in peer-reviewed journals. When you look at that data, there's no doubt in my mind that what we're looking at here is an image that was formed by some mechanism that was most likely a natural mechanism, perhaps supernatural, remembering that science can't really deal with issues that are beyond the realm of science. And so I feel that, you know, the weight of the evidence is there for me to believe that this is the cloth that most likely wrapped the man Jesus.
And what would create then that image? Let's assume, let's go on the basis of assumption for a moment.
Okay.
That the body of Jesus, after he was crucified, and the way you just described, was wrapped with this shroud. Mm-hmm. What would create the image on it? Would merely bloodstains emitting from his body do that? I think not.
No, actually, it's interesting you bring that up, George, because where there's blood on the shroud, there is no image underneath it, implying that the blood got on there first via contact. In other words, the cloth touched the body in the blood-stained areas, and the blood transferred via capillary action into the cloth. So where there's image, however, there are places where the cloth did come in contact with the body, tip of the nose, top of the hands, top of the legs. And in those areas, the image is darkest. As the distance between the cloth and the body increased, as it laid over the body, the image grows more faint, and we've determined, the experts have determined, the physicists have determined that whatever the mechanism was operated at a distance of up to about 4 centimeters from the body. Anything further than 4 centimeters, the image just faded out. There are no distinct edges on the shroud, as one would expect from an artwork or a photograph. The image just sort of gradually fades out to extinction. So we don't really have any specific image formation mechanism that can account for all those properties, particularly because in this cloth-to-body distance business, where the image density or darkness of the image depended on how close the cloth was to the body, it also encoded what we call spatial information, or commonly known as three-dimensional information.
That's
normal photographs don't do that. Normal artworks don't do that. And so you have these image properties that, how could that have happened? Well, there are a couple of theories that are, I think, reasonably viable.
All right, pop through them.
Probably the one that I favor the most, because it does account for some of the most difficult properties of the image, is what was originally characterized by a French researcher, I think in the 1930s, a gentleman named Vignon, and he called it the vaporograph theory. And he implied that the vapors coming out of a dead body, which come through the skin, through the nose and the mouth, had somehow impacted the surface of the cloth and left an image there. One of the things we've shown about the image and characterized about the image is that it does not penetrate into the cloth the way something painted would. It's only on the top surface of the fibers. And so in recent years, a number of years ago, a researcher who was on our team named Ray Rogers from Los Alamos National Laboratories came up with a theory. He had rejected this vaporograph nonsense, he said. He called it nonsense 25, 30 years ago. But he revisited that. He was one of the few scientists in the realm of the shroud that has ever stood up and said, gee, I was wrong about something, and I think the new evidence shows that I was wrong. And his theory was that he discovered chemically on the surface of the cloth a polysaccharide, a sugar, if you will, a coating, if you will, on the surface that came from washing the cloth after it was woven in something called saponaria, or soapweed, a commonly used means of kind of like a fabric softener, if you will, that softened the stiff linen and made it more pliable. And it was generally rinsed in that and then rinsed off and then air-dried, and by evaporation deposited a thin layer of this saponaria on the surface of the fibers. Now, if you lay that over a dead body, what kind of chemical reaction will you get with this polysaccharide? According to Rogers, who was, by the way, a world-renowned chemist, it's something called a Maillard reaction. A Maillard reaction is the same thing, the same chemical reaction that makes beer gold, bread brown. And so he believed that the amines, or the gases, outgassing of the dead body, actually impacted the cloth and caused a chemical reaction on the surface of these fibers that is the image. It's very, very subtle, and it's only slightly more yellow or darker than the surrounding areas. Now, a lot of people don't agree with this theory. And I have to say this, that our team went to Turin in 1978 with one goal, and that was to determine how the image was formed. In essence, when we came back and we spent 2.5 years reducing the data and then publishing it in scientific journals, we couldn't answer that question. We could not give one mechanism that would account for the physical and chemical properties that we found on the shroud. You get the chemistry right, the physics doesn't seem right. You get the physics right, the chemistry seems wrong. So a lot of people disagree with this theory, but as I said, it accounts for some of the most difficult properties of the shroud's image. Now, there are many other theories that have been promoted for the image formation mechanism. Some people have said radiation. Others have said a burst of light.
A burst of something.
Or a burst of energy of some sort. Yeah. Well, you know, some people would like to believe that it was the energy of the resurrection that created this image. Now, since resurrection is not really a scientific term, I mean, scientists cannot go into a laboratory to resurrect bodies and see what kind of images they can make. So we can't really test that scientifically. So my opinion is this, that those of us that have to stay within the realm of science have to look at the resurrection event as something external to science, at least at this point in time. And staying within the realm of science, we could tell you what it's not. We've proven it's not a painting. We've proven it's not a photograph. But we cannot tell you a mechanism that will account for an image with these particular properties.
Now, wasn't the tomb where the body was placed, there was a big rock in front of it?
That's
wasn't
correct.
Wasn't that apparently moved? It was open and the body was gone, which leads me to believe the body did not dematerialize and appear somewhere else. It must have come through that opening.
Well, you know, I'm not certain of that, George. I do know that one of the theories of the image formation is that the body did dematerialize and the cloth fell through the body, or through the space where the body had occupied, and that somehow left an image on the cloth. Again, you know, in science, George, you can't use an unknown to prove another unknown.
Sure. But why a rolled open rock then in front of the cave?
Well, you know, I'll be honest with you, George, I didn't study the rolling rock as much as I studied that piece of linen.
I look at all this stuff.
Yeah.
Not as in-depth as you, but I look at it.
And so, you know, look, I'm going to go where I can with this and be honest with you. There are some things, some questions that, you know, that if I have to step out of the role of somebody who's studied it from a scientific point of view, then we're into a level of, you know, speculation, opinion, personal opinion, perhaps even personal faith. And look, I don't discount any of those theories from those people. I just look at the evidence, the peer-reviewed scientific empirical evidence that I was a participant in helping to gather, and I have to stick to that stuff and stay within that realm. And it's not easy because this, unlike most objects, this has strong emotional meaning to so many millions of people, and including some of the people who are pro-authenticity and some of the people who are anti-authenticity.
Sure.
So it stirs the emotions the way most, I mean, you know, King Tut was a beautiful exhibit, but it certainly didn't stir the emotions, at least not of most people, the way this piece of cloth in Turin does. So I think you have, you know, you're dealing with something that you know, think about this. This is religion and science living together on one piece of cloth. Now, you know, in our society, those two philosophies are generally,
mix.
Yeah, they're diametrically opposed to each other.
Water and oil.
Yeah, and yet on this piece of cloth, we have a symbol of people's faith, and we have an enigmatic image that science, although this has become the most studied artifact in history, we still can't give you kind of a straight answer as how this might have been made.